This is kind of a two-part story. I'm going to set it up for you with Bryan Fischer, and then we're going to go into an actual economic analysis. Bryan Fischer suggested that poor people should be so thankful to the rich for everything that they should be throwing parades for the rich. This was Bryan Fischer of the American Family Association. He was reading a Wall Street Journal article which said that the top 1% of Americans account for nearly 30% of all federal tax revenue. And for him, this means that the poor ought to be kissing the ground on which the rich walk. Listen to this.
Overall federal receipts from the top 1% of earners rose by 1.3 percentage points to 29.3% of all federal tax revenue. Now, they control about 17% of the wealth, but they pay almost 30%, 29.3% of all federal tax revenue. Top 1% are funding 30% of the government. So rather than the poor and the low income and the middle class being resentful of these people, they should be kissing the ground on which they walk. Who's paying for the EBT cards? Who's paying for food stamps? Who's paying for the Women and Infant Children program? Who's paying for subsidized housing? Who's paying for Medicaid? It is the top 1%. So they ought to be given ticker tape parades once a week in all of our major cities to thank them for funding welfare for everybody.
First and foremost, the kind of economic thing here is that we know supply side economics, trickle down economics, voodoo economics. It just doesn't work. It doesn't trickle down. We'll get to that a little more later in the show. But secondly, the taxes being paid right now by the very rich are far lower than at many other times in history. And we never hear that from people like Bryan Fischer. In fact, taxes are significantly lower for the very rich under socialist Indonesian, Kenyan, Muslim president, Native American. What else is there? I know there's more. President Barack Obama than they were under Ronald Reagan. For 7 of Reagan's 8 years in office, the top tax rate was higher than the current 35%. In 6 of those years, it was 50% or more. And every single year that Ronald Reagan was in office, the bottom tax bracket was also higher than the current 10%. Also, if the rich pay 30% of the tax revenues, that means people other than the rich are paying most of the tax revenues. Why wouldn't the poor have a parade for the 99% that are paying the majority of tax revenues? I guess Bryan Fischer didn't think about that.
No, his comment also assumes that everything is just great for those who are poor and receiving welfare, right? Like they're just living this wonderful life.
The top 1% control 34% of the wealth. And if you look at the top 5%, they control 62% of the wealth. Let's compare that to the bottom 60% who control only 20% of the wealth. Maybe they're a little too busy worrying about themselves to start throwing parades for people. I don't know. They don't have the money for parades, unfortunately. This program is supported directly by you. Please go to davidpakman.com/membership to become a supporter today and get a whole bunch of great member benefits while doing it.